Hi, my name is Peter Martinek-Jenne, and I'm in the High Point University Leadership Academy. Standing tall in this photo are the Greensboro Four. These four brave young men made history on February 1st, 1960, when they walked about 1.5 miles from their dorm room at North Carolina A&T State University to the Woolworth store on Elm Street in downtown Greensboro, North Carolina. It was in the height of the civil rights movement in the United States. Separate but equal was the law, and segregation reigned in the South. Black people couldn't drink from the same water fountains or use the same bathrooms as white people. Black people couldn't even sit at the lunch counter for a meal. These four young men decided it was time to act. By walking into the Woolworths and sitting down at the lunch counter, they launched the sit-in movement across the country as black people stood up for their rights by sitting down at these lunch counters. They sparked a revolution that spread across the United States and helped black people achieve equal rights under the law. When I was teaching at Peeler Open School for the Performing Arts, a Title I magnet school on the southeast side of Greensboro, I would bring my class on a field trip every year to visit this statue. We learned about the Greensboro Four and the incredible courage they possessed. We talked about how different our school might be had these four men not taken that 1.5 mile walk. We learned about fairness and what it meant to have equal rights. We read Freedom on the Menu by Carol Boston Weatherford and were inspired by Martin's Big Words by Doreen Rappaport. Martin Luther King said, "Everyone can be great." And this was the philosophy in my classroom and continues to be a big part of my leadership purpose. As I have continued my journey as a classroom teacher, instructional coach, and now as an administrator, I have come to realize that although equality is inspiring and absolutely necessary, it is not enough to simply integrate a lunch counter or a public school classroom. In 1967, only 7 years after the first sit-ins in Greensboro, Martin Luther King spoke for the struggle of genuine equality. He said, "It's much easier to guarantee the right to vote than it is to guarantee the right to live in a sanitary, decent housing conditions. It is much easier to integrate a public park than it is to make genuine, quality, integrated education a reality." President Barack Obama echoed this sentiment when he spoke to our nation after the tragic murders of black worshipers at the Emmanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church in Charleston, South Carolina in 2015. He spoke to the inspiration of the church's congregation and the family members of the victims. He spoke to the reservoir of American goodness that propelled South Carolina leaders to remove the Confederate flag from the state capitol. But then he stated, "I don't think God wants us to stop there. We've been blind to the way that past injustices shape the present." Leadership in our schools must not be blind to these injustices. Leaders must identify the inequities that persist and make it a priority to give every student exactly what they need. Equity is the lens through which we must look as we create exceptional schools. Equity is at the core of my leadership purpose, and I am committed to creating equitable and inclusive communities where we take ownership for student learning outcomes to ensure students have what they need to succeed in school and in life. But the question remains, how do we know what our students need to be successful and grow in our classrooms? Academically, this is fairly straightforward. We can administer a variety of assessments to determine a student's strengths and areas for improvement. We can provide strong core instruction on grade level standards. We can differentiate that instruction to push those students who are ready for more challenging material, and we can intervene with those students who have foundational skill gaps. The challenge becomes knowing what our students need socially and emotionally. I would argue that the social curriculum is equally as important as the academic. Yet this type of instruction is often not even considered in our schools. Social emotional learning takes a backseat to testing, where schools become ultra-focused on proficiency rather than growing all students. Many of our students are struggling before they even step foot into our classrooms. In their book, Trauma-Sensitive Leadership, John F. Fuller and Tom Hyrick explain that regardless of the school district, more than half of the students enrolled in public schools have faced traumatic or adverse experiences. and 1 in 6 students struggle with complex trauma. Adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs, are potentially traumatic events that occur between birth and age 17. ACEs can include experiencing violence, abuse, or neglect, witnessing violence in the home or community, or having a family member attempt or die by suicide. ACEs could also include not having enough food to eat, experiencing homelessness or unstable housing, or even experiencing discrimination. The Center for Disease Control conducted a study on adverse childhood experiences and found that ACEs increase the risk of negative health outcomes later in life, including obesity, diabetes, depression, asthma, and heart disease. ACEs can also lead to having difficulty identifying, expressing, and managing emotions. The trauma can cause significant depression, anxiety, or anger. What does this look like in our schools? The CDC also found that ACEs can affect learning and behavior in the classroom. Students with 3 or more ACEs are 5 times more likely to have attendance issues, 6 times more likely to have behavior problems, and 3 times more likely to experience academic failure. Discipline is a problem in many of our schools. Students are distracted and not engaged in instruction. They are disruptive in our classrooms and disrespectful to their teachers. Emotions flare and students engage in aggressive behaviors like vandalism or fighting. Students are suspended and then miss days of core instruction. A common reaction is that these students are giving teachers and administration a hard time. But often this is not the case, especially for many of our students who have experienced trauma. Students aren't giving us a hard time, they are having a hard time. I see this as an incredible opportunity, an opportunity to lead with heart. It starts with building relationships and creating a culture of care. How do we support these struggling students and help them understand that we care? First and foremost, these students need connection. This was one of the most tragic results from our global pandemic, an attempt at online learning. All students lost connection with their school community. And then to compound this fact, many students lacked the connection at home too. We need to restore this connection for our students. We need them to know that they belong in our classrooms and that they are cared for when they come to school. The Collaborative for Academic and Social Emotional Learning, or CASEL, is a leader in SEL research around the globe. Their research shows that when students have supportive relationships and have opportunities to develop and practice social, emotional, and cognitive skills across many different contexts, there are positive gains in academic achievement. Students have higher levels of school functioning, including better attendance, better behavior, and better test scores. Long-term outcomes include consistent improvements in social and emotional skills, which contribute to positive lifetime outcomes up to 18 years later. Yes, students with strong social-emotional skills are more likely to reach milestones, including high school graduation, post-secondary enrollment and completion, and stable full-time employment. But results will not happen overnight. In order for adults to provide this caring and supportive environment for our students, we must first learn what SEL is and why it is critically important. We must learn how to care for each other as a staff before we can provide this support for our students. We must begin to learn how adverse childhood experiences affect each student differently and how we can implement social-emotional learning structures school-wide. Professional development for all staff members is essential and will provide a solid foundation for consistent SEL implementation. Then some simple next steps could include beginning each day with a morning meeting in our elementary schools, or starting each class with an SEL opener in our middle and high schools. These structures build classroom community, give students opportunities to make connections with their peers and their teachers, and create a safe environment where students can feel comfortable learning and growing together. Schools can shift from a fixed or deficit mindset to a growth mindset, where students embrace challenges and believe in the power of yet. Staff can teach students breathing techniques and provide opportunities to practice mindfulness each day to help students be more present in our classrooms and engage more consistently with instruction. And just like when we differentiate for academics, we need to differentiate for our students' social and emotional needs. This might look like administering an SEL learning survey in our elementary or middle schools to determine social, emotional, and motivational strengths and areas for development. This will help teachers create an environment that best supports our students' academic success, social emotional development, and overall growth. This might also look like giving middle and high school students an adverse childhood experiences questionnaire, a short 10-question survey about common traumatic experiences that students may have been exposed to early in their lives. And although it is not a comprehensive list of all possible trauma, it is a starting place. Not only will it raise awareness for potential impact that these ACEs have on our students, but it can help schools provide additional resources and support for our students and their families, and help students know that they are truly cared for when they step into our classrooms. One of my heroes, Martin Luther King, said, "Love is the key to the problems of the world." I would also argue that love is the key to the problems in our schools. If we can continue to be inspired by the courage and action of the Greensboro Four and by the love of Martin Luther King, then we can create inclusive and equitable learning communities where all students can grow. And then we will be truly leading with heart. Thank you.